All right, good morning, everyone, and welcome. Today is Tuesday, May 2nd, 2023. We're welcoming you to a work session of the Board of County Commissioners of Manatee County. It is an absolutely beautiful day today outside in Manatee County, and we're going to start in our typical fashion. We're going to start by honoring God and by honoring our great nation. So today we have Wendy Thompson of Glory Cloud Ministries, who is here to deliver the invocation, after which Commissioner Jason Bearden, our Marine Corps veteran, will lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. So at this time, if you're able, please stand.
Good morning. It is a beautiful day, isn't it? This is the day the Lord has made. We should rejoice and be glad in it. Father, we just thank you. We thank you for your presence. We thank you, Lord, for your precious Holy Ghost being here, directing this meeting, giving them wisdom and direction to do great things in this community, in this county, Lord God. That your hand be upon everything that they do, Lord. I thank you, Father, for guiding them and directing them by your word, Lord. The word says, seek ye first the kingdom of God, and all these other things, and his righteousness will be following and directing your steps. Give them peace, Lord God, in all the conflicts that are going on, Lord. Let there be solutions and no more problems, because you're the solution maker. And Father, I thank you that they open up with prayer. I thank you, Lord, that they invite you into their business, into this community, into this county, into this building, into their hearts, Lord God, that they take you in and they seek you, Father. Give them great peace, Lord God. Show them your power, your understanding, and your wisdom this day, Lord God. In Jesus' name, amen. You're welcome.
Thank you, ma'am. That was beautiful. Great way to start the day. All right, I'm going to turn things over. The first item is Community and Veteran Services, so we'll turn things over to our Acting County Administrator, Mr. Washington. Sir?
Good morning, Mr. Chair, Commissioners. Thank you very much. One of the priorities for the board over the last few months is to take a look at how the county invests in not-for-profit agencies. And this morning we have representatives from not only Community and Veteran Services, but also Public Safety staff to come up and speak to the scoring matrix, the application process, and to get the board's advice or guidance on how we'd like to proceed as it relates to those funding investments. So with that, I'd like to introduce Dr. Renice Remy from Community and Veteran Services.
Good morning, everyone. Renice Remy, Criminal Justice Policy Coordinator for Community and Veteran Services. We'll begin with an overview of our adult nonprofit investments. Just a reminder, this is in the adult section. Children's Services uses a separate process, and so is a different from ours. So Manatee County has historically invested in those programs, nonprofit programs that serve those that are not otherwise would be able to get some of the services offered. It's designed to meet community needs that enhance the quality of life for those in Manatee County, again, those that may not otherwise receive these services. Oversight is provided by the Community and Veteran Service Department as well as Public Safety. Previously, it was all housed within the Community and Veteran Services Department. Now our contracts are split between the two departments. So our countywide nonprofit investments, again, under the Community and Veteran Services section, we have Children's Services investments, we have the Adult Human Services investments, and then under Public Safety, we have Health Services investments, and that includes the homeless and housing services. So the purpose of the investments are to assist citizens with achieving independence and self-sufficiency, prevent long-term dependence on public resources, encourage partnerships between community organizations, and we all strive in all of the areas of investments to avoid duplication of services. Next, we'll have Jeff Cords. He'll give an overview of the health services investments. That includes the homeless investments.
Good morning, Commissioners. Jeff Cords, Health Information Services Manager with Public Safety Department. As Dr. Remy mentioned, your health services section oversees a portion of the nonprofit investments for Manatee County government, and we're going to briefly go over those in the next few slides. As a point of reference, this board approved just under $2 million for these programs underneath the health services umbrella last year. That funded 16 separate programs. For the remainder of these slides, we're going to be discussing the FY24 funding that these programs and nonprofits have requested starting in October 1st of this year. So that is a total funding request of $2.5 million, just over that, for 19 programs. This includes programs that were previously funding and also new programs as well. One thing that I did want to note is that previously this board has provided funding for not only low-income pool but also graduate medical education funding. That it's a Medicaid match funding that we have completely separated from this process. So if the board chooses to continue to fund those programs that provides matching funding through the state of Florida, those requests would come forward to this board in September of this year. So we've broken down our funding into three specific categories: behavioral health services, traditional healthcare services, which includes primary preventive care and pharmaceutical programs, and then homeless and housing services, which public safety just took over recently. So out of those requests, the majority, approximately 50% of all funding, is being requested to support behavioral health services and nonprofits that cover those programs. Just over $500,000 is for traditional healthcare services, and then housing and homeless services is $727,000 for fiscal year 2024. And then breaking those down even further, under behavioral health, these are the different programs that are requesting funding. We've also broken it down into existing programs, which this board has traditionally approved year over year, and then new programs for those organizations that are requesting funding this year. Existing programs cover things like Marchman Act, Baker Act. Those are your involuntary examinations for individuals with mental health issues or substance use disorder. It also covers inpatient detox, mental health transportation within the community. And then the Academy at Bradenton is a new program that this board chose to fund last year, which provides career education services and training for individuals with mental health disorders. And then new programs for the upcoming fiscal year include NAMI, which is providing peer support again for individuals with behavioral health conditions. Impact Tidewell is offering to support the community with a grief support program for individuals who are suffering from mental health trauma. And then Tactical Healing, which is a program that's going to look to support our veterans with PTSD and other mental health disorders and their families within the community. Moving forward to healthcare, these four programs were funded last fiscal year and are requesting additional funding or continuation funding for fiscal year 2024. That's MCR Health with their HIV nutrition. We also have our volunteer healthcare provider programs, which includes our one-stop clinic and We Care. Both of those organizations offer free medical care and are supported through volunteer hours for their individual providers. So it's a significantly reduced cost to the community by providing those services. And there's no new programs under healthcare requesting funding for the next fiscal year. Finally, the homeless and housing services that are requesting support this year to the tune of $727,000. We have 6 applications, with 5 of those being previously funded through Turning Points and Salvation Army. our traditional emergency shelter program that's provided through them. We also have our homeless outreach team, which is a specialized program within the Salvation Army for those individuals. And then the continuum of care is the group of nonprofits and community entities that are working together on the homeless solution. So those are all, we have to designate a lead agency, and Suncoast Partnership is that lead agency for our continuum of care. So we provide them with funding to be the lead agency and also to manage our homeless management information system, which is a database required for inputting homeless data. We also have a new program that's requesting funding, which is Habitat for Humanity, and they're going to focus on individuals with disabilities and veteran seniors who need assistance with external home repairs to ensure that they can stay in their homes. All right, next I'm going to turn it back over to Dr. Remy to discuss her programs and services requesting funding.
So under our Human Services section, there were 15 applications last year approved for a total of just under $500,000. This year, we have 13 applications with a requested amount of just under $600,000. So the requested investments fall in the Human Services area under five areas of service. So that includes aging services, career education and development, criminal justice and legal services, disability services, and some system supports for our nonprofits. So under the aging services category, we have 2 applications that came in. One was new, one is an existing program. Myakka City Community Center is the existing program. Meals on Wheels Plus is the new program, although we had previously funded this program in years past. Under Career Education and Employment Services, we have 1 application. It's an existing program for Women's Resource Center. It's an employment program for an amount of $25,236. Under Criminal Justice and Legal Services, we have 2 applications for funding. They are existing programs. We have no new requests for funding. They are for Gulf Coast Legal and Legal Aid of Minnesota. They provide pro bono legal services for civil cases for the county. And then under disability services, we have 3 existing programs that applied for funding, no new programs. Those programs are for Easter Seals, Lighthouse, Vision Loss Center, and Sunrise. Sunrise used to be called United Cerebral Palsy, so it's the same company under a different name. And then under system support, an existing program, Manatee Community Foundation, they provide trainings and support for our nonprofits in applying for funds and managing their budgets and raising funds and other funds for their programs. Next, I'll go over what our current process is in the adult services section. So on or about December of every year, we have a press release and informational meeting. So we do a press release on our website. We have offer an informational meeting for nonprofits. And then we have the application period opens for about a month. And during that time, agencies are able to meet with staff, to call staff with any questions, email staff about the application itself. The application itself does provide guidance for nonprofits on answering questions, but staff is not able to, of course, assist agencies with filling out their applications. After that, staff will review for completeness. So we're reviewing for completing the questions of the applications. So did the agency answer the question? And did they provide all the necessary documents? So did they provide an insurance certificate? Do they have a most recent audit available? And so forth. Then we score those investment applications. Again, the scoring is based solely on answering the questions. So did they answer the question? Yes, no, they get a score, and we follow a matrix with that. Following that, we provide those scores to our director, who then meets with the county administrator to review the scoring, to review the applications we had come in. And our county administrator provides an update to the Board of County Commissioner members at their one-on-one meetings with him. Following that, historically, the board has reviewed and approved those investments at a public meeting, at one of your public meetings, and approved those annual investments. During that time, the board might change a recommended funding amount or request to increase an amount, or request that the staff look at a new application for funding for an agency that might have come in. Jeff will now go over some of the recommended process changes.
So, Commissioners, we've identified a couple areas of opportunity where we feel that we could better serve the community by changing the current process in place. So those things highlighted in orange are additional areas where we would like your consideration to review that process to see if that aligns with your investment priorities. So one of the things we wanted to do was set up priority areas. So right now, the way the application process works is it's open to any nonprofit in the community recommending any program. All right, so one of the things we'd like to consider is priority areas, which increases the scoring for certain nonprofits that are meeting a critical need within the community or a gap in our continuum of care or our system of care. The other thing we'd like you to consider is having some type of scoring modifier, which will allow us to provide additional points to entities that are continuously working and meeting their results first requirements in their agreement, their contractual agreement. It would also incentivize those organizations to openly communicate and collaborate with our staff, and then also to provide timely documentation. So it would incentivize that. It would also potentially decrease points for entities or organizations that are not providing those services. So based on discussions between Dr. Remy and the two departments, we've identified these as potential target areas that we would like you to consider to prioritize. So these individuals, if adopted, these individuals would get additional points after the application scoring process, which would again increase their potential to get funding through this county. So Dr. Renese, did you want to go over your human services?
Yes, so I sort of touched on them in the beginning, but so our aging services, of course, would cater to the elderly. We do have a program that caters to the elderly and the disabled that are also elderly. Career education and employment, we have the Women's Resource Center, but we would, of course, want to open it to more agencies that offer that service. Very important. Criminal justice diversion, that's been a struggle for us for a few years, just trying to create partnerships with other nonprofits in the area that provide criminal justice diversion services. So that's a big one that we need nonprofits for in our area. Disability services, of course, we have the Easter Seals, we have Sunrise, and they have historically provided, lots of services in our area. And then finally, legal assistance. So that's the pro bono or pro se cases that fall under the civil cases. And those agencies really provide services for, someone that might have been taken advantage of in some type of upgrade to their home. Perhaps the elderly might have gotten scammed out of paying for, something that they never got the service for. So legal assistance is available to those types of individuals. And also people that might need any types of assistance with any civil cases. So any civil litigation, those agencies provide assistance for.
And then under health services, we have assistance with substance use disorder, both inpatient and outpatient treatment, expanding homelessness prevention and providing case management for those individuals, outreach and remote medical care, which is outside of a traditional medical clinic. We also have dental services, which there's a significant delay for those in Manatee County for the indigent residents. And then peer recovery, which is programs that support individuals with lived experience that, again, share that experience and get individual enrolled in specific programming. So those are the five that we would bring forward to this board for consideration. for additional scoring, moving into the next scoring, which will be December of this year when we open that application process. We also want to recommend that previous performance modifier. So what that looks like is we would take our current application scoring, all right, that we're already doing. We would add this board's priority modifier scoring, and then we would add or subtract the previous performance modifier, which again is based on a scoring matrix that we would create, and it's specific to how the individual performed the last year. We would recommend a scoring increase for baseline scoring of 80. And what that would do is ensure that the organizations that are receiving funding meet the requirements or the priorities of this board. And just to touch on the performance modifier, as I mentioned, what we're looking to do is increase documentation compliance and completeness. We're looking to ensure that these organizations are meeting their results first or contractual obligations. And the other thing is increasing communication between these organizations. So we know the ones that are proactively assisting and providing regular services and communication to our staff, and we want to incentivize that and ensure they're getting additional points.
So we are also requesting or recommending a special application process. So currently, if an agency wants funding, they of course have to apply during the application period, but special circumstances might arise where they might be a new agency that can fill a need that meets a board priority. So we want to have a special application period outside of the yearly application period that would allow those agencies to apply for funding. So previously, what has happened if an agency wanted funding outside of the application period that runs from about December to January, board would have to intervene. So a board member might have to put something on the agenda or request a special agenda item for that agency's request for funding to be addressed. So we're recommending a new process. It would follow the regular process, but would allow those agencies to be able to apply for funding, go through the regular channels, and then bring that back before the board for approval or for whatever the recommendation is on the funding for that agency.
Let me ask you, how many more slides do you have?
This is the last one.
Okay, we'll carry on.
So finally, to wrap up, Jeff?
So again, we're looking for guidance. At a later date, we'll be bringing the actual application recommendations for funding for the FY24 period and those nonprofits based on the current process. But what we'd like the board to consider is, adopting some type of priority area that it would allow us to target those nonprofits, to adopt, instruct staff to adopt a baseline scoring metrics, or investment process, and again, that special investment process that Dr. Remy previously discussed. So we're looking for clarity from this board so we can bring forward those motions at a future meeting.
All right, Commissioner Ballard is on the board with questions. Commissioner?
Thank you. So I love the suggestions about adding priority areas. I think that makes a lot of sense. I think that your suggestions for priority areas are really good. The one question that I have is related to substance abuse, detox, those types of things. Since we've got a significant pool of funding from other locations for that type of treatment, does it make sense for that to remain on as our top priority in the health services area?
That would be based on this board and how we're going to dispense. I think you're speaking to the opioid litigation dollars specifically. Yeah, so there's been some discussions. I think there's going to be a work session coming up. And I believe the funding could be matched between the general revenue funds that go towards supporting these nonprofits and the opioid litigation funding. So we could potentially increase and keep that as a priority, but utilize that opioid litigation funding if that's something this board wanted to consider.
Okay. And then my other question was, I love the idea of the results-based scoring modifier. I think it definitely makes sense that we'd be scoring organizations higher if they're communicative, if they're getting in the information that they're supposed to, if they're meeting their contract obligations. My only concern with that is whether we're going to discourage investment in new nonprofits who might really fill a need. if they, won't score quite as high just because they don't have that modifier there of prior success.
That's valid. I mean, you get, right, new groups come in with better ideas, more efficient, better ways of doing things. And oftentimes that's the difference between, usually it's the difference between capitalism and socialism, right? It's kind of, you don't want to eliminate that capitalistic sort of, free market angle, do you?
Of course.
Commissioner Baugh.
Yes, thank you. Just a quick question. You had mentioned you wanted to be able to take applications throughout the year and not just at one time. So in order to do that, would you keep so much money in reserves, or would you just look at us to supply you with more money at the time? What is your thought process on that?
For us, under the adult human services side, we have about $20,000 already set aside within our budget that would account for those agencies. So what we would do is, we won't have an endless supply of money, of course, but we'd have that special application period. We'd post it and we'll say, hey, we have 15,000. I think we might have 17,000 currently in the budget for any agencies that meet a board priority. So first they would have to, of course, meet the board priority. But we wouldn't, and so once that money is out, then the application period would close.
Okay, and thank you for your answer. Good answer. And just one more question, just thinking about what Commissioner Ballard said. If you did have a new nonprofit that came in that wanted to start a very similar program that we already have or whatever, how would you go about looking at that nonprofit to approve it? Do you already have something in place for something like that?
Yes,
or-
so for our side, so it's the general application. So if you approve of the 80% scoring for the application, so once that agency fills out the application, of course, we have other system supports to help that agency have a good application. And once they meet that 80%, if we have the funds available and we bring it to the board, or we recommend it to the board even if we don't have the funds and the board decides that they want to fund that agency would be funded. The key, of course, would be to meet that 80% baseline score. So all those modifiers just add to the agency should they not meet that baseline score. So it would be the board would be able to bring, so if an agency scored, 60%, which we've had agencies scored that low, and the board decided it would be a priority, which we've had agencies that met a
I
priority.
think we've done that in the past, actually.
Then you'd bump
before.
that score up for that agency, and then, it would be, of course, the board's final decision. So even if if the agency didn't meet that 80%, the board could still decide to go, because this is, of course, we always say it's just staff recommendations. So we're just recommending it, and then the board could still say, hey, we really need, for instance, I'll use Lighthouse. We really need that service. There's no other agency in the county that provides that assistance for the blind. They didn't score very well. We want to fund that agency because they meet a significant need in the county. So there's
Thank you.
always still that the board makes the final decision.
Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Thatcher.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Is there anything in the process now that, so if if an organization applies, let's say they, don't get past your scoring metric, is there any, do we ever see that? Does anyone ever see that besides the few people that are scoring it? Not that I would, if an organization doesn't do well, you don't necessarily want to advertise to the whole world on the one hand. On the other hand, when I first came here, there were organizations that I know for a fact are amazing organizations. This was not in y'all's department, but there were organizations that I know 100% are amazing organizations doing work that no one else is even willing to do, that had gone years of putting in applications, had finally given up. And to my knowledge, the way the process was in this other department, I don't think a commissioner ever even saw it. And I don't even know if an administrator ever saw those applications or a deputy administrator. So I don't know, I wonder if we could put something in the process to where at least if some people want to take a look, because, these are kind of salt of the earth organizations, hopefully. That's our hope, is who we're getting, applications from, are the people that are stretching to do as much as they can. Well, one thing I know about those types of people is they don't want to cause waves. They don't want to call 7 commissioners and say that I was wronged. And so, but we need to keep an eye on it. So I wonder if we could make something like that a part of the process, or is it already part of the process?
I would say for us, it's already a part of the process. We've had agencies historically that, they didn't even have an insurance certificate uploaded, for instance, and we still put that on the agenda when we present it to our director and the county administrator. And when we bring that final document to the board, that chart, I don't know if you remember seeing it, the chart has all the agencies listed, even the ones that we say are not recommended for funding. And for those agencies, like I mentioned, we work historically with Community Foundation, where they have workshops for agencies that might be struggling to fill out their applications, so that they can go get help, turning in a better application, or maybe specifying their services better. Maybe they didn't answer the question very well, so where agencies can get that type of assistance.
That's great. Thank you for putting my mind at ease. I appreciate it.
Mr. Washington.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So to add on to or give additional comment to Commissioner Ballard's question, I think the presentation actually would help new organizations apply for funding, because it would be able to identify what the board is interested in funding. And should they fall short, it still gives them the formal process to bring these applications to the board to weigh in yea or nay whether they would fund them or not.
All right. I don't see anyone else with questions, so I think we can probably move on. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, Commissioners.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chair. Next up, we do have our CFO, Sheila McLean, and her staff to speak to the board related to the ARP funding process and what improvements they would like to implement. So Sheila,
All right, the always popular CFO.
money.
Good morning, Commissioners, County Administrator, County Attorney. Welcome this morning to our ARP update and the introduction of the generational impact projects. To give you a little bit of a preface as it relates to ARP, back in February 7th, of 2023, we came to the board with a work session to talk a little bit about the background and the history of what has transpired with the American Rescue Plan, the plans of the lists that have been approved since inception, and what has transpired over the course of the months, given the fact that we're already 1 year and some months into it. We wanted to actually discuss also the fact about what other changes had happened that had taken us and led us to bring back an opportunity for other discussions on some projects, as we saw some challenges in the ones that the original list pledged. This morning, we are coming back to you with a further, even more update on some direction that was asked for us on the motion from the February 7th to bring back to you a series of projects that were being vetted. We sat with the commissioners, each one of them, and you gave us our initiatives as to what you wanted to see happen with the ARP dollars that were remaining. It took us a couple of weeks, but here it came us to this conclusion where we are bringing you as a group the consolidation of these topics. Right here with me, I have Hunter Foxwell, my Deputy Director of Financial Management, and then I have William Constanzo, he's my ARP guru, as I call him. And he will be initiating the presentation to give you a little bit of a history and move on into the transitional of the projects. Bill?
Good morning, Commissioners, Mr. Washington, Mr. Clegg, and colleagues. Today, we'd like to talk about the work session from February 7th and just bring that up quickly and just summarize that, and then move on to where we are today. So as we go, this is our playlist for the moment. Again, a brief recap of February 7th, the new challenges facing the ARP and facing our county today. And we're going to provide some solutions and lessening of the restrictions that surround the ARP. And then we have some possible action items for all of us to think about. So a brief recap, when we met on the 7th of February, we talked about the American Rescue Plan from its inception, March of 2021, and bringing the original project list forward in January of 2022. And then as we got into a little more detail, we talked about the influences behind the American Rescue Plan with 2 executive orders that were throughout the guidance from Treasury, and that had extreme restrictive covenants on eligibility, procurement, and reporting. And it made it very difficult to work with projects because of those restrictions. But then we talked about the new guidance, and the new guidance was what we're calling the revenue loss provisions. And the revenue loss was effectively a gift from Treasury that would ease some of the administrative, some of the procurement, as well as some of the recording burdens, because Treasury recognized it was difficult on counties like ours to be able to implement the projects that so many jurisdictions wanted because of the restrictions. So the key to the key to the revenue loss, that are all government services are considered eligible uses of ARP funds. Think about that. All government services. It's clear in the guidance, but also the revenue loss provisions told us that we didn't need to follow the restrictive 2-part 200 CFR and the difficult with procuring under the ARP. And then finally, we talked about how Manatee County calculated a formula that was also provided by Treasury, that we calculated our revenue loss to be $69.5 million through fiscal year 2021. And that number cannot go down. It can only go up as 2022 is finalized. So when we met that day, this board instructed us to meet with each of the commissioners individually, and there we go, and to compile a list of your ideas and generational impact projects that you see for our county. We have done, as you've asked, we've compiled the list, and we've met with everyone. So here's what we need to impress upon us all today. The new challenges facing the ARP, and they're substantial. It's time. Over here behind me, all funds must be encumbered by December 2024, encumbered being purchase orders or contracts, and then the remaining funds need to be expended by 2026. There are no exceptions under the guidance, and there are many provisions on how to give the money back. The other restriction under the revenue loss is that there can be no subawards or subrecipients. That also limits our ability to, if any of the commission would like to make contributions to some of the valuable 501c3s in the community. It does not allow for that. But Sheila, our CFO, and Hunter, our deputy director, and I, we sat down, and we felt it is our job and our responsibility to provide solutions so that this board can do what you think is best for our community. So this is what we'd like to talk about. This is Bill interjecting into the slides today. This is my personal and professional philosophy that there are no problems, there are only solutions. And we're going to meet these challenges, and that's what we took it upon ourselves with the help of our team, our outside consultants. We had them call lobbyists. We did everything we could to get as much information to provide solutions. So I'm going to reiterate the most important piece of the revenue loss provisions, and it says, all government services are considered eligible uses of ARP funds. Yes, ma'am?
So before we bring a solution to this problem, I wanted to recap a little bit of what Bill had said so that we have it fresh in our minds. One, the original guidance was so restrictive in the sense of timing, in the sense of the fact that we had to follow very restrictive procurement guidelines, and in the sense that you can do sub-recipients, you can do sub-awards. Second, as we move far along into this ARP, Treasury comes up with revenue loss provisions. In this case, second step they've taken was to loosen up a little bit the restriction of take away the procurement restrictions, take away the Davis vacant restrictions, which still have the time constraint. And that actually, with the times that we are living and trying to accomplish projects on a regular basis, on a daily basis, has become a challenge. And this is where we are today. The revenue loss provision establishes all government services are considered eligible on uses of ARP funds. And this is what my team and I have delved even deeper. And I'm sorry, Bill, I jumped into with you, because I think it's very important the community understands that this is the focus of Treasury. This is the focus that we are moving along with Treasury. And with that said, we are going to provide you with a solution.
Thank you, Sheila. So our proposal would be to use the remaining uncommitted ARP funds for truly a government service, which would be to fund the general fund payroll from our general fund. This would allow us to utilize the remaining funds in the ARP before the deadlines that we just spoke of a few minutes ago kick in. This allows us flexibility, and it also allows us the ability to use the full $78 million.
Okay, I'm going to stop you right there.
Yes, sir.
I think it's a great idea. I'm glad you came up with it, and I just wanted to go around the horn here and get the opinion of board members so you can get some direction. Commissioner Cruz, we'll start with you, since you're waving your card at me.
Yeah, I mean, we saw this presentation yesterday in depth, so we're just seeing it again. So we know what the punchline is on the back end, where we're still going to use the funds. I mean, I don't like stopping on this slide. It's giving a poor presentation from us, the public who's looking at it, because to say we're using the rest for general fund payroll, we need to clarify that the intent is just effectively to remove the timeline restrictions. All those funds, dollar for dollar, are still going towards ARP type projects. I think it's important to clarify. That's why I was like, this was kind of backwards. We should have explained we're going to use all the funds first. Here's how we're going to remove the timeline through laundering these funds through our payroll system. Yeah, it's true.
Now let's go to the next slide.
My only concern with it is, and I mentioned this, I mentioned this yesterday, is everything takes a long time in government, and people don't like things taking a long time. I mean, we're still 10 years into creating our community land trust after 8 work sessions. I kind of like some level of timeline because it forces us to do something. My concern is and I said this yesterday, like, we're going to put $51 million into a reserve that's dedicated towards ARP type projects, but we have elections every 2 years. And that 51 million, a lot of it's going to still be in that reserve. The end of 2024, and a new board's going to say, I want to see what I want to do with that $51 million. And then we're going to start that process. 2 years later, another board's going to say, my concern is this money sits there for a long period of time until someone forgets why it's there in the first place. And then someone says, we need an extra 3 miles of lane road someplace. And there's conveniently $51 million sitting in a reserve. And then we lose the opportunity to do good, constructive things for the community with these funds. And these funds are coming from the federal government, being paid for by all of us and our kids and their kids indefinitely. And the intent was to use this on projects that all of us for generations could reap the benefits of. So that's my only concern with this. I like the concept. I especially like the concept if it's allowing us to do some unique things like the 501c3s. So that part of it's important. I don't like the concept of just doing it for the sole purpose of eliminating a timeline that's already pretty far out by 2026. It certainly was far out from when we first started talking about ARP 24 months ago, when we could have been doing some of this, like the broadband and so forth, which was universally held up by that board as something we wanted to jump on right away. So I like the concept because I like the flexibility in terms of utilization. I'm not a big fan of the flexibility in terms of timing, honestly.
Thank you, sir. And I agree with most of what you said, but I would have articulated it a little different. And I agree that maybe we could put a different slide up because what we're doing is removing the timeline constraint. The money is not going to payroll, is sort of the way that read. But I understand why you had it up there, but it's still going to ARP projects. You want to just kind of go around the room here? Commissioner Ballard.
So I said in my briefing yesterday, I love the idea. I think it's creative. I was personally nervous about losing some of the funding because of the fact that we may not be able to encumber all the funding by the end of 2024. I also love that it takes away the restrictions. We're able to provide funding to some of these 501c3s. But I think that Commissioner Cruz does make a really good point about timeline. I think that we should try as much as possible to stick to a timeline on getting these projects out and started. So, knowing that we're not going to lose the money, having that security there, but still working to get these projects started as though we would lose the money, I think is what we should be doing.
Commissioner Satcher.
No comment at this time.
Okay, Commissioner Bearden. I think if nothing else,
Thank you.
you don't have to necessarily opine, but they're just at least looking for
No,
positive or negative feedback.
I think it was, you guys get paid to be creative. And so coming up with this solution in order to become creative so we can actually utilize those ARP funds in the future and not hold them up, I think is what we pay you guys to do, and you guys did just that. As far as the wording goes, the wording is the wording, that could always be changed. But I appreciate you all coming together and trying to figure out how we could utilize the funds as best way that we can. So I appreciate that. That's all I have.
Thank you, sir. Commissioner Baugh.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I commend you for finding alternatives. We were on a tight timeline. I was also concerned that there was no way that we could spend that amount of money as quickly as we needed to, because government, as Commissioner Cruz says, we don't move that quickly. Not necessarily our fault, but we don't move that quickly. So I do understand that we need to move these projects forward as quickly as we can. That's time is of the essence, because we certainly don't want 4 years from now, another commission looking at it and changing what we're doing. But at the same time, I think it's fair to say that our needs in this county change from year to year. So I think we've got a good project list at this point that all the commissioners, I think, now have been briefed and looked at and contributed to, and we've got a path to take. And with everything you've done so far, I'm sure you'll get it done as quickly as you can. So thank you, and as I said yesterday in my briefing, way to go, guys. Very creative. And I think, isn't there 3 other counties that are doing this as well? Is that correct?
That is correct, Commissioner. And in these challenges that we've been looking at for over a month now, we did not want to bring it to the board until we were absolutely certain of the legality and that the Treasury guidance was also allowing us to do this. Ernst & Young has been our partner since the beginning, and they have also gone out there into the community, into their peers, to make sure that, and to see what's out there and what other municipalities are doing to be able to address these challenges of time restraints. 3 municipalities have already been doing this, and the idea really actually strives from backing CARES, because the Treasury actually determined as well that there was going to be no way that all the municipalities are going to spend the money back then. They said, okay, let's loosen up even the restriction and let's allow government payroll as a government service. And so we used some of those dollars for that, freed up some, and we actually went further, put monies in reserves to pay, in general fund, to pay for other projects that have already been completed as well. CARES is closed, all the money was spent, and the additional monies were spent on very good initiatives in the county. Now, moving forward with ARP, that's where the idea came forward. We analyzed it, we dug deeper, my staff met with Ernst & Young, and we determined that this was an allowable and legal way of doing business.
Yeah, and the last thing that I'd say is that, whether it's federal funds, state funds, or local funds, it all comes from the same place, taxpayer dollars. So, thank you. Good job.
As another point of comment, Chairman, if I may, the restriction that we're coming today to free up is to put the monies in a reserve in the general fund, because of course by moving the payroll and using ARP funds with for payroll, it's going to loosen up the monies in the general fund, which I will be placing in a special reserve. Once it's placed in that reserve, nobody other than the board can move those monies for any other purpose. So it is the will of the board to move those reserves only for these projects that have been designated for. If the board chooses to make any other designations, that is the board's choice. Now, if we can continue with our presentation on how do we accomplish this, move a little bit further and talk about now how do we, as we're calling it, closing the zipper in ARP. We're not saying that the projects that are already moving in ARP, we're going to eliminate them. No, they are still remaining there. The ones that actually have no activity and then we have no traction because of the timeliness and because it's going to take longer to design, and it's not any different than what any other CIP project that we have out there is having the same constraints, the same timeliness problems. Design takes anywhere between 8 to 13 months to design a project. And of course, it moves into a construction phase. By that time, it's already a year and some to be complete a full infrastructure project. So all these things have been vetted. It's an educated result, and we are bringing you the result of how can we accomplish this. So if I may, we can move forward with the presentation. Bill?
This is the original project list from January 4th, 2022, that the prior board voted on. What we're going to ask today is if we can close some of the completed projects, which all came in under budget, and move those monies into a reappropriation pool of additional monies for this board to be able to add to projects that you feel are necessary for the community. And I'll just go over them quickly. We purchased the EMS vehicles not much, but $500 below budget. That's a good thing. The ineligible was the GT Bray EMS station, and only ineligible because that project had started with other funds, which then makes it ineligible for the ARP. So we're asking to close that project and move that money down. The sheriff's radios came in almost $1 million under budget. We had a testing for COVID clinic by the Department of Health. That also came in well under budget. And this COVID carryover of monies needed to finish some of the CARES work, there's $572,000 available. And we're asking if we could just bring that down for a total of $3,991,000 that again would be available back to this board for reappropriation. We're asking for one administrative change, just for transparency and getting closer to the Treasury guidance. We're just asking if we could pull the $403,000 out of this bigger pool of COVID dollars, and that is for the FMD ARP, our team. And it was embedded in that 13, and again, for transparency, we would just like to pull it out as a separate project number 25. No reappropriation really necessary, other than just creating a new project and just moving the monies down.
And as a point of note, when we talk about administrative charge, ARP allows us to use at least 15% of the of the total of ARP and administrative costs. We are only using 1%, and that is only to staff. One person is Mr. William Constanzo from ARP, and secondly, the payment to the Ernst & Young as our consultant.
So this really is the crux of our work to date for the ARP. If we close those projects as we're requesting, then create an additional number 25 for our group, we'll have 20 active projects with $51 million that are still uncommitted. Now, there's important to note, when we say uncommitted, there's $78 million in total that we all know is the original ARP amount. And in total, only $27 million had actually projects brought forward. Of the current 20 active ones, there's $15 million of active projects. However, we've only spent almost $4 million on that, which means we have active projects, but they're not encumbered. There's a bit of a difference. However, the $51 million is the $66 million minus, where are we? Minus the committed $15 million, where there's no projects are even on my desk. And that's what we're saying. We're very concerned about the timeline. And with meeting with all the commissioners, there were some incredibly important projects that you presented to us. And then we were looking not at the 2026 number, we were looking at the December 31st, 2024 number to encumber. With some of the projects maybe needing wetlands and design work and permitting and then having to go to procurement, we wanted to make sure that your visions come true. That hence the solution that we've come up with today. Okay. So this again is the crux of our work. I'm sorry, Hunter.
Wait, let's, I'm sure we're going to have people that want to talk about the previous slide.
Yes.
I'll start. So number 13, county COVID response, 7 million, remaining 7 million.
Mm-hmm.
So none of it was used. I don't need necessarily line item expenses here. This is not an audit, but I'm just wondering, in general, what, can you give me some kind of like overhead idea of what sort of expenses that 7 million is being planned for?
Commissioner, that was from the original project list, and in your packets, I do have some descriptions of the original from 2022. And my understanding, and Hunter and Sheila were here, I'll let Hunter explain that particular number.
Good morning, Commissioners. So that item was originally kind of the same premise as CARES. It was personal protective equipment, cleaning supplies, masks, all the things that were needed during the height of the pandemic. So when this was originally brought, money was set aside for the
It was
continuation
thought
of
we might
those
still
kind of
need more
items.
of that. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, sir.
Okay, good news, commissioners. I just found $7 million. Not really, but but kind of. Okay, that was the only one that screamed out at me. I don't. Commissioner Ron isn't here, and it's the old if you're not sitting at the table, you end up on the menu thing. So I worry about getting too far into ripping things out. But that seemed like a general, like countywide kind of vague thing that we pointed out.
I'm so glad I'm here today.
Yeah, right. It's a bad day to miss. Yeah. Is anything else that glaring out to anyone on this list? There's a different list later.
No,
Is that
this the
7 million
same
on the
list.
final list?
So this is the original list. It's just I'm giving you more information with the transition of what has been committed, what has
Gotcha.
been
Okay.
encumbered.
Understood, but I
Yes,
just
sir.
wanted to clarify, this is a list of showing how we get to the $51 million being moved. The allocation of the $51 million is a separate list, so discussing these line items without seeing the final list
Right.
that has things like soccer fields and Easter seals and things is premature. That's all I was saying.
Yes, sir. You are correct. Yes, we are taking step by step so that for only the sake of the commission, but also for the sake of the citizens that are watching this meeting. It's a lot of information to absorb, so we want to make sure that we hit every single topic in detail. This slide right here, it does present all the projects that have been there before. We haven't morphed anything yet because we haven't had a true board meeting where we could get action on projects and balances and remaining uncommitted funds. So this is going to be the height of it, so that on the May 23rd, we can bring it back with asking for a full motion. This list, if you see where it says option A and option B, we're giving you two options into how do we accomplish this and what is the amount of money that we are moving into payroll, and we're covering ourselves for ARP so we can do those generational impacts. Option A is if we take the $51 million today of unremaining uncommitted funds, these are projects that have no traction, that we know we cannot finish on time by the December 31st, 2024 encumbrance date. And absolutely the departments cannot make it work. Let's take that $51 million, and that's the number and the target that the board will give direction for us to move the payroll into ARP, $51 million, and $51 million where the projects in general fund reserves will be defined for it, as we will be talking forward. Option B will be if you take the $51 million and from the column of D, which is the other one that's circled of the 11.6, you can take some projects in there that have, we know at this point that we cannot exercise it or move forward. For example, that would be the $1.5 million that you see up above on line number 18 for the Veterans Homeless Project, whereas the $1.5 million was a previous administration had given direction to do some design work in the building across the street because the idea was to convert that jail, the old jail, into office space. Well, that has not taken traction. Nothing has been moved. So we are, FMD is putting the advice that the board, if it wishes to grab those dollars and add them as part of the 51, option B will become almost $53 million, and then we can move forward with that. We do not recommend all the other projects balances as it is because those are projects that actually are moving. Those projects are actually taking traction, and some of those projects are also reimbursing for staffing, like the EMS, BLS, ambulances, and so forth that are in items number 8 and 9. Those items are already in motion. So every pay period, that balance will move all the way until depletion. So once again, we don't recommend taking all the other ones because they're already, we see movement, we see things happening with those, and they are, as we move along, and Bill is one that monitors weekly the spend on those and how the progress of those projects are happening. So he's actually saying, okay, if we snap those monies, it's going to be very hard if we come back and they need more money. We're going to have to find it somewhere else. Why not leave it there, monitor it for a year, make sure that they're doing what they say they were doing, and towards the end of the year, we'll come back, or monthly, we can give you updates on what's happening with those dollars, and further down the road, you can give further direction on the remaining balances right there. Does anybody have any questions? No? Okay. So we're going to move into the next slide.
Just reiterating what Sheila just said, is the number of projects, option A, that don't have any active projects on our desks for ARP projects is $51 million. And then if we add the 1.5 million, we come very close to $53 million of uncommitted ARP funds. That allows, again, this board, and the next slide will take us forward to what you said to us about what you envision for the county. And I want to add, just because the projects on the prior slide, we're saying shut them down so we can use the $51 million, it doesn't mean that we can't do those, because some of our commissioners have projects that are on the old list that they thought are still good, like stormwater and broadband. So it's not that we're eliminating them, we're just saying let's use the ARP money to pay payroll so we can refocus and get a new list to move forward. And as our CFO succinctly said, we'll set it aside in reserve so those projects get done, and they can get done just as fast as we can do them, as fast as you want them to. It's just that we're not going to lose part of the $78 million. That's really the crux of this work. So we metaphorically use a zipper. We snap the door, we zipper it closed, and then we use the money for payroll, and that allows the remaining monies in the ARP, the remaining money in the ARP to go towards payroll, and that then the funds in general reserve are for projects unrelated to ARP, but they're still your projects and good projects. So this is where we introduce the results of our discussions with all of you, as was guided from the February 7th work session. So if you look on our list, we spoke individually and we came up with 15 projects from each of the commissioners, your initials. Some, for example, number 8, 2 commissioners were in favor of the Lake Manatee EMS workstation. EMS house, excuse me. And as you can see, we have a Board of County Commissioners for number 1, the affordable housing for the Astoria and the Riverview 6 projects. We know the board has absolutely supported that. We just haven't been directed to move the monies towards it from that prior $78 million. So we just need your direction to set that forward. So we know everyone was in favor of that one. So these are our generational lists. And as you can see, some of the ones at the bottom, number 13 and 14, absolutely prohibited under revenue loss, but absolutely available to those wonderful 501c3s if we move the money into general fund. So we'll go forward. Now, some commissioners were still in favor of bringing projects forward that are already on we're calling it a continuation list. For example, we have Commissioners Baugh and Bearden, and our IT department has an active fiber loop broadband project right now on the board for $5.1 million. And when I say on the board, I apologize, on my desk with a ready-to-go ARP project. Also, we have a Wi-Fi in the park that we approved months and months ago, and they could not find a vendor to quote it. Finally, a vendor came in but the vendor came in $866,000 higher than the request originally. So we're just, again, being that it is still under that broadband $7 million, this was asked to be brought forward, or a continuation from the original list. Same thing with stormwater. I have 32 projects right now sitting on my desk. We were asked to hold all projects after the February 7th meeting. They're ready to go. It's 18 and 14. Some are repairing pipes, and others are putting in automated systems at certain high water spots. I'm not sure of all the technical. It's the engineering a little bit above my pay grade. But it's wonderful. They're wonderful projects for our community. Also, the tunnels to towers. I know Sheila knows a lot more about the 6.1 million than I do. And again, continuation of the homeless veterans project that we had on the prior board. And then finally, Natural Resources came forward with a $2.1 million ARP project for the Greenway, and that's for design and construction of a piece of it. Again, under the prior guidance, when I say guidance from the board, we would put it right through because it's eligible, and we would have moved that along. But again, we're bringing it forward as a continuation project because it is on hold since February, since directed. So if we go one more slide, this is everything. I'm sorry, Hunter. 19 projects from meeting with all of you, some of our departments, and the total is about $54 million. And very, very close to the almost $53 million that we're talking about uncommitted funds. So if this, and we're not saying these are absolutely not approved, these are just discussions with us from all of you. But it gives us the opportunity to get these wonderful things done. And that's the point of all this today, is that we want to make sure your goals and your desires for our community are done.
Thank you, Bill. When you look at this list, please note on the far left side, it says these items are in a list that's proposed. It's not being fully vetted by the board, even though it's the wish of each independent commissioner, and the continuation of the other ones that are in the ARP list. We will bring in this, once this list is approved by the board on the May 23rd meeting, each project, once they take live and we get all the logistics of the project, and we will bring those as budget amendments to be taking them out of the reserves set aside in the general fund. Once again, we no longer are going to talk about ARP. We're going to be talking about GI projects, GI impact projects, and the general fund reserves. Budget amendments and agendas we will see as the projects take action and they're ready to be shovel ready. We will be reporting on these projects as they are moving forward, for the sake of the speediness and for you to know and give you information on these particular projects as well. Bill?
So in conclusion today, Commissioners, just to reiterate, the first thing we're asking is if you could authorize to make those administrative changes, closing the projects, and then moving that money, the $3.9 million, for reappropriation, just to clean up our new starting point. Secondly, we're asking you to...
Why don't we do these things as you go through this list? Do you have a problem with that, or do you want to read all of these off, or do you want us to execute on these as you're going through your list of 6 requests?
This is a work session.
Okay, I gotcha. So
But,
then real quick, before we go any further, what is your plan then? Are you planning to bring this to us on the 9th for a vote?
So
And get some
on the
heads
9th of-
nodding or shaking
Yes.
today? Is that the plan generally?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Today was informational, to give you all the information and the data and to convey the information, and then to explain the motions that we're going to be making on the May 23rd. Unfortunately,
23rd,
we
sorry.
will be
Okay.
out of town. FMD will have some prior commitments.
Oh, we're going to spend a ton of money that day.
But-
Perfect.
Yes.
The whole department will be out of town. We'll be running hog wild. Okay,
So May
I
20
just wanted to know, that was the overview. Sorry, go ahead through your
Yes.
6.
So
Thank
on
you.
May 23rd board's meeting, we will be coming with three motions from the board. we will be asking, one, to approve the amendments, to the administrative changes, which means those that he explained originally was close the completed projects, those that are ineligible, and the administrative function put in a line item, nice and clean. The second one would be for approving creating the new project in ARP, which is going to be called payroll as a government service. And then the third one will be you will vote on option A or option B. Option A would be taking the $51 million. Option B will be taking the $51 million plus the 1.5 and initiate generational impact projects in general fund set aside reserve.
Okay, so quick question. Going back to the list when you sat down with each of us, and I mean, because I think there's a lot of crossover. Some of those were listed as like individual, but there's a lot of those where I think virtually all of us support those things.
True,
I mean,
it's true.
You know, Commissioner Satcher needs soccer fields. Yes, it's his item, but everyone wants soccer fields in Parrish, right? There's no one up here that's opposes that. Just as an example. So that puts us at 54.7 with an availability of, did you say 51?
52 and a half.
52 and a half. Okay, who's counting?
So I'm so sorry.
Yeah, that's okay. I just wanted to make that point that we're at 54.7 with an availability of 52 and a half. We can all let that percolate however we want. That means a little extra money is going to have to come from somewhere or something's going to have to come out. Sort of is what it is. Okay, thank you. I just wanted to make that point before we moved on.
Exactly.
Commissioner Baugh.
Yeah, Sheila, just out of curiosity, in looking at the list, I know yesterday we went through them quite a bit, but are there any that we need to be aware or considered that, you know, is there reoccurring cost on any of these that would change our general fund moving forward?
Yes, ma'am. There are several that will take on a recurring cost into the general fund or any other funding source that they would be deemed eligible to use. That would be we'll have to attach positions to it, maintenance costs to it, location, maybe building to be built or maintenance to be had or some other, they are. So the reason why we're saying we're going to come at a later date on a work session so that we can put the pros and cons into the project so you can actually vote on which projects move forward and which projects stay behind for further discussion or realignment.
And the reason I bring that up is because I was hoping you were going to, you know, give us some sort of list to look at because it's going to affect our budget from here on out every year. So that's why I just wanted the board members to think about that when we're looking at the list and trying to figure out what to move forward, what to maybe hold on or whatever. So, all right, thank you.
Can I ask a super quick question of Commissioner
Yes.
Satcher? It's probably I think it's a typo. Number 11 says Parish Fire Station. Is that supposed to be EMS station?
Respectfully, Commissioner, no. Commissioner Satcher had visions of needing help in the fire with the fire district and with, again, loosening up ARP funds. It's certainly a visionary generational project that certainly to be included for all of you to
I
discuss.
need more than one.
So and a little background on it is that, Sarasota County, their fire and EMS is all underneath the county. So they spent tens of millions on fire, versus we said, you make your own taxes, forget it. So I felt like, the area is growing so fast, it changes everyone's fire insurance. They just put in a new, and obviously it would have a spot for EMS to be in the station if we put that kind of money towards it. Or maybe it would technically be ours and they rent for a nominal amount. But yeah, that was the plan. The south side, I don't know if it's even considered the south, but over towards Rye, they have a new station. It's, just opened last week and it's been great, but you still got all those homes going in, around Moccasin Wallow, North River Ranch, that area. So I felt like that'd be something worthwhile.
It is a predicament having the fire districts. West Manatee was the only government in Manatee County to raise taxes the last 2 years. That's my district. And for similar reasons, I know. Well, I did send them a letter, as did Senator Boyd and Representative Robinson. But anyway, they were improving services, and they said they had the support of the community, so that's their decision, obviously. And I opposed the EMS station at GT Bray. I'm not a fan of EMS stations. I think we should share with fire districts because we're unnecessarily creating redundancy. But apparently I didn't stand up strong enough on that. I should have, but it is what it is. Commissioner Baugh.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I'm glad to hear you say that because I totally agree. This all started before any of you were elected, under 2 or 3 administrators back who wanted to start, EMS having their own buildings. It was just a way to spend more money. It was really unnecessary. There really wasn't a major problem. I can only really speak for East Manatee, of course, but I know in East Manatee there wasn't a problem. I mean, we had a spot for the ambulances. The rent was dirt cheap. So we've kind of gotten ourselves in that predicament. So, I guess I'm not going to recommend changing it now, but it was a cost that I felt was not worthwhile. So I was glad to hear you say that, sir.
Yeah, and I dug into it a little bit. And in the past, there were issues. I mean, the city, the reason the one at GT Bray was built was because the city evicted our ambulance from the fire station. Things got deteriorated to that point where they evicted us. It is city. I get it. The mayor was willing to. He was willing to work with us to add on to there's a brand new fire station, and it was very frustrating that they were literally building a fire station at GT Bray. Simultaneously, we were building an EMS station at GT Bray, and it just seemed very egregious and wasteful to me at the time. I didn't fight it enough. I should have. And when I spoke to the West Manatee chief about it, who's a friend and we get along well, I asked him, I said, hey, give me some history in the background. And he said, yeah, it's a difficult marriage between us. And he said that, to be honest, I didn't realize the city had evicted you all. He says, if I'd known I could, I probably would have a while back. He says, but things are doing better now. But that spoke volumes because he's a super nice guy, and I didn't expect him to say that. So, but I think things have improved, and it's top down for everybody to ensure that the relationship stays positive and cohesive. Anyway, I just wanted to quickly bring up EMS and fire stations. Sir?
And then seeing these slides, the old list versus the new list, and then I do realize that some of the things that I consider, we make our votes and then they kind of generally they're going to get executed. So there are some things on the old list that between now and our official vote, I'm going to check in on. I mean, I want to make sure that we're still providing for the new, ALS and BLS units. And if not, we got to get creative because we do have a shortfall there for the whole county. So seeing that on the old list and not on the new list, which would obviously be on me, not talking to them and putting that on the newer list. But I'll check into that, and maybe we all could on our own between now and our final vote and see where. Because I haven't heard anyone mention that our opinion or plan has changed on that. We seem to need more units as we've added more population. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yes, sir. Commissioner Baugh.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a quick shout out, since we're talking about EMS. Jimmy Crutchfield has been the EMS chief for a while now, and he does a great job. And there's many changes that needed to be done in EMS over the years, and he's really come a long way with the department. I think if you talk to some of the paramedics, you'll never have everybody happy all the time, but we surely have a lot more of the paramedics and so forth that are happier with their jobs now than what it used to be when I first got elected. I just want to give him a shout out. I mean, he works very hard. I can tell you that man has called me Saturdays, Sundays, night, day, I mean, it doesn't matter. He's working. So just wanted to mention that. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Yeah, and Jimmy does do a great job. Things are much improved. They're going in the right direction. Commissioner Satcher.
Yeah, I just want to echo that as well. I had a great meeting with Jimmy and Jody. We got a real all-star on staff with her, and probably 2 weeks ago, and just some great plans that are going to really just change for the better response times and safety here in the county. So I agree. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Commissioner Bearden.
Same thing. Just I had the opportunity to be with Jimmy for about 3 to 4 hours last week and just kind of ride around and see what's going on in the county, and it's definitely something that's much needed. Any help that we can obviously give him and his team as well as Jody, I think is definitely a priority because, man, there's a lot of calls going on in this county, and I know there's certain pockets that need it more than others, but I can just attest that what I saw was, and the job that they're doing over there is absolutely amazing. So.
Yeah, right along with EMS, I have done one, and I just did middle of the day, and it's interesting. One, watching them interact with people who are in a very stressful situation. Sorry, financial management. We've sort of you got hijacked into EMS, but yeah, you go into, and they're your constituents, right? That was what I thought was the most interesting. Is I was right in the middle of my district, and we went into constituents. Ended up a lot of them going into their homes, and during a stressful situation when they're not expecting company, and so it was kind of eye-opening experience. And I went on a Saturday. No, it was like a Tuesday afternoon. It wasn't anything that like a crazy time of the day. I did an MSO ride along on a Saturday night, and that was much. That was very eye-opening. I know Commissioner Baugh did a MSO ride along on like a Monday afternoon, and she ended up at a horrendous car accident. Three fatality car accident at Lockwood and 70, I believe. So you literally never know. Those guys never know, and women never know what they're walking into every single day. But anyway, I apologize, financial management. We got sidetracked there.
If I may make a point of reference, Mr. Chair, even if this list were fully approved, there are still $27 million that have been committed on the original list, of which, Commissioner, the ALS and the BLS staffing is included, so those wouldn't go away. It would be added. This would be added to those that we have committed funds or committed projects, excuse me. So
Awesome.
It'll always total to $78 million, so that gap is projects that are committed. I want to make sure that we wouldn't lose those valuable services
Right.
and Jimmy lose those valuable people. And also, again, a point of reference in your packets, there are two lists in the back. One would be the descriptions of the original ARP 24 projects from 2022. So you have a little bit of background, especially our newer commissioners who weren't here. And also, there's the pros and cons list of these new generational projects, things that we've talked about on our team, just as you all mentioned, recurring costs or FTE to do these types of projects. Again, just to give you some background when you're thinking about them.
Thank you, sir.
Yes, sir.
Does that conclude your presentation?
Yes, ma'am.
I recommend it. You
concludes
give
our
nodding
presentation,
positive
yes.
feedback. Okay, good. Commissioners, are there any other questions for FMD while we're here? Okay. All right, we're going to take a 10-minute. It's 10:28, so we'll take a 10-minute recess.
Thank you.
Okay, welcome back, everyone. Welcome back. And we're on our last agenda item, which is a presentation on waste hauler contract extension operations. So I believe I'll turn things over to Evan Pilichowski, who is our Director of Utilities. Sir.
Good morning, Commissioners. So again, I'm Evan Pilichowski. I'm the Utilities Director for Manatee County. In addition, I have Chris Collins, who is our interim Deputy Director for Solid Waste. You will probably be seeing him in the future on additional waste hauler contracts. Apologies. All right. So at the February 28th board meeting, the board gave us direction to negotiate extensions to the existing waste hauler contracts. We have gone through those discussions. We've had a couple of meetings with both of our existing vendors. Our intention here today is that this is informational. We will give you what the results of those discussions were, and we plan to come back to the board on May 9th, next week, to ask for direction on how we develop the actual extension documents to make sure that it is in line with the vision of the board. So, very important point here. I just do want to reiterate that the extensions, this is not simply just a lowest price negotiation. We do need to make sure that we have a high quality of service. So the citizens of Manatee County have an expectation of a level of service. And so a lot of our discussions during these negotiations has been focused on how do we ensure that we do continue to provide those services to the residents of Manatee County. There are some particular challenges with this because this is an old contract. That means it's about 15 years old. That means a lot of the equipment is also about 15 years old. There are continuing challenges when it comes to hiring practices. So they are just like us, where we have a hard time attracting high quality applicants. So we have, and we'll get into this a little bit in more detail in further slides, but I do want to just reiterate that point, that it really is quality of service and price. In addition, we are looking at a 1 or a 2-year extension period based on our negotiations. We just really do want to make it a point that it's very important that we believe that these should not be negotiable prices once an extension is in place. We've gone through the process. It's at most a 2-year contract extension, and if we went down that road, we would be looking at a CPI adjustment after 1 year. No further adjustment to those contract prices, we believe. No further discussion should be had on any further adjustments based on what's been negotiated. So again, quality of service, this is very simply highest level. Make sure that we have the resources in Manatee County and make sure that we have a proper plan and a proper amount of planning that goes in with any transition. So adequate number of trucks is certainly a big one. This is one that we've talked with the vendors extensively on. They've provided equipment lists for the extension period. They've committed to bringing in some newer vehicles from some of their other jurisdictions. They've committed to making some refurbishments of existing vehicles, but we still do have some concerns because there is quite a bit of equipment that's more than 10 years old that would be out on the roads in Manatee County. So in addition to that, they've presented a lot of information to try to convince us that they can provide a high level of service for Manatee County residents. Based on everything that they've presented and the plans that they presented, I am convinced that they are capable of providing a high level of service for the county. It's going to come down to the actual execution of those plans that they've presented, though. You know, that's something that's very important. And one of the greatest tools that we have to ensure that they do follow through on those plans is the use of liquidated damages and the contract language as a whole. So the extended contracts would continue to have a liquidated damages clause in it so that we would have the flexibility of using that tool if needed. So as I mentioned before, we negotiated a 1-year and a 2-year extension option. From a high-level standpoint, what that means is a 1-year option would give us enough time to go back to the RFP that had been negotiated previously. Would have to have some sort of adjustment to pricing because we couldn't have an execution date within 2023. There's simply just not enough time to do a responsible transition plan. So we'd be looking to delay that a little bit based on the 1-year extension. Or a 2-year extension would then allow us to restart solicitation, have a brand new RFP, and make sure that we get the input from the board at the very beginning of the RFP to ensure that the scope of work included is what the board wants us to actually solicit. So, in addition to the big picture question about 1-year or 2-year extension, there were some other concepts that came up during our negotiations that we wanted to bring to the board. There are really 2 service changes. One is the move from a twice-a-week garbage pickup to a once-a-week garbage pickup. So that's the 211 to a 111, and also deduct alternatives, similar to what we talked about in the last RFP. So these are ways that we can get some additional cost savings, but there are some significant challenges implementing these changes during an extension period. There's at most, we're talking about a 2-year extension period. That's simply not a lot of time for us to go through a whole transition process and a whole change in how we do business with residents. It can include things like changing the service day for everybody in the county. That needs to be really well thought out and communicated effectively, only then to turn around after a year or 2 and do it again. So it's really a change management nightmare to go through that level of change for a 1 to 2 year period, only to then go through that process again. So people in the county are likely to be dissatisfied, and we're worried about the quality of service that we would provide if we made these significant changes at this time. So in addition to that, the 111 option, based on input from our consultant, what we have understood is that when entities move to this transition period or move to that level of service, it's usually successful when you can couple it with the distribution of carts and the move to automated service. In the extension period, we're not going to have that option, unfortunately. We just simply can't go to an automated waste collection and distribute these carts. There's just not enough time. You'd have to purchase all new vehicles. There's not adequate time to distribute those capital costs with a whole new fleet of trucks for just a 1 to 2 year extension period. So we, of course, will do whatever the board directs us to do, but we have some concerns about either of these options, moving to a 111 or implementing any of the deduct alternatives at this time. All right. So as a reminder,
Real quick, because I mean, you brought up some good points, and I'm kind of thinking I want to speak, and Commissioner Ball wants to speak. So go ahead, Commissioner.
Yeah, you brought up a lot of things, for us to think about as far as, a temporary service, so to speak. So I guess my thought is, I would have never even considered, me personally, changing the service except perhaps to go to 111. That would make sense to me, because we know we're going to do that when we select a contract or contracts permanently. So I don't have a problem with that. But as far as anything else, I certainly wouldn't expect any hauler to go out and buy new trucks. They have trucks, they can keep using them. And the other thing is, our residents, we should make it, I agree with you, we should make it as easy as possible for the residents while this is going on, which tells me, obviously, we need to keep the same trash cans that we now have. So I'm assuming that's kind of where from what I've heard from you, that's your thought as well. Is that correct? Am I right on that? I'm not sure.
Partially,
Okay.
partially. And I don't want to enter the debate, but to just dig a little bit deeper on the 111, one of the concerns I have on that is that basically doubles the amount of waste that's on the street for that one day.
Gotcha.
Residents are then going to have to purchase additional bins or
They provide their own.
or containers because they provide their own, or it's going to lead to bags of trash on the side of the road.
So basically, then you're saying, that's what I needed to confirm. You're basically saying we need to keep it the way it is for right now.
That's my recommendation.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, sir. So, Van Ostenbridge, Ballard, Cruz. I'm going to kind of agree with you too. I'm going to agree with Commissioner Ball. I want to go to ultimately 111 in the new contract. However, I kind of go to Commissioner Satcher all the time. He and I have very different garbage production at our homes. He has 6 kids. So I'm sure he probably has a certain number of cans that are meant for twice a week, right? If I miss a day, it's not, the end of the world. Sometimes I only take the garbage out because it stinks. It literally never fills up the can. But, he probably can't miss a day, right? So he would have to go out and get more cans to accommodate that. So I think we're stuck with the 211 for now, for the extension period. But your other recommendations on the previous slide of like the one-time bulk, the annual bulk, yard waste, all that stuff, I would be comfortable with working all that in now. It's not a huge difference, right? And sort of, so we start acclimating ourselves, as the county to these changes that are coming anyway, and it saves some money. So yeah, I would be okay with those changes being made now, but I think we're stuck with the 211 until we can buy everybody, cans. You're not going to, if we buy all the cans now, you're kind of pot committed with the two. Not that I'm saying I'm taking a position on the 2 carriers that we have, but we kind of become, let's call it can committed to the 2 existing carriers at that point because we've purchased all these cans. Anyway, just my thoughts. Ballard and Cruz.
So I think we're all coming to the same conclusion here. I got on the board to say I don't think it's a good idea to switch to 111 while we have the cans that we have, because we're going to have people who are going to be very frustrated, who are going to have garbage everywhere, who aren't going to know when to take out their trash, and it's going to be a 1 to 2 year period, and we're just going to absolutely frustrate everyone. Making those changes on the margins with the yard waste and free annual, depending on how much money that could save us, I'm open to those kind of smaller on the margin changes.
Thank you. Commissioner Cruz.
Yeah, I agree with the 211 if this is what we do for the same reasons everyone else said with the cans. I disagree that adding these little deduction alternatives up here makes sense on an extension. Look, I'd love to make those. My concern is we're talking short-term extensions here. It's not as easy in some cases for flipping a switch. One, you have to advertise, make sure you get the information out to the public to know they can't just put unlimited stuff out on the side of the road. Second, something like, let's use bulk items, for instance. Well, what's going to be the cost of picking up a refrigerator or a couch or whatever? Someone's have to go through and do that analysis and create the fee schedules and change the systems and the software to account for those things. That's not an instantaneous thing. We're going to ask somebody to put in the time and the effort to compute that just for a 1 or 2 year extension for 63 cents. But if people want to do it, that's fine. My question to you is, as we go through this, just so everyone can think about it as we're going through the slides, I know I'm jumping ahead on slides, but just so we can have it in our mind is, I was fundamentally against the extension in the first place. I said extensions are more expensive than long-term contracts. That's just how every extension on the planet's always worked. And all we're doing is kicking a can down the road, and basic CIP is going to effectively make our future long-term contract most likely more expensive because they're just going to go up, even if it's just by inflation. I don't think we're getting the savings we think we're getting, and your numbers down the road show we're looking at like $17 a month for extension versus $14 a month for the long-term contract, which is effectively a 20% increase in cost over the next 2 years to the homeowners just to renegotiate a contract that'll probably go up 10% over the $14 by the time we negotiate it. So is that original contract, the long-term contract, still on the table? Or have we kind of crossed a path where now we're picking 1 year? Because I don't see that even as an option on your slides, because what we're asking for here is 1 year or 2 year extension using old equipment and old trucks that are going to leak on the roads and have to use the old systems of manual pickups and 2 times a week and everything else just to be able to pay more money for older trucks and the old system while we negotiate a contract to pay more money to put the system how we want it. Is that offer, is there still actually a third option that we're not being presented just to go back to that originally negotiated contract?
So the contract was tabled by the board. You can go back to it. The concern that we have is we don't have adequate transition period to properly plan for it at this point. So a October 1st, 2023 start date is off the table. We would have to go back to those vendors, negotiate a change to those prices, probably a CPI adjustment, and look at a later implementation period.
But you had said at one point, as long as we could give them comfort that it could start by the end of the year, they would still honor it, correct? Didn't you say something, or was I misunderstanding you?
That was correct back in February. The period of time needed to purchase trucks, plan for the transition, it's simply, it could be kind of like a square peg in a round hole. You could force it in and we could try to make it happen, but I would have some pretty significant concerns. I don't even know if we would be able to pull it off successfully.
So we lost that opportunity. Now we're
believe so.
basically down to the 1 year, 2 year extension.
In the short term, yes.
Thank you, sir. You can keep going with your presentation, Evan.
One thing I will mention on the deduct alternatives, just to add to it a little bit, the limiting yard waste and eliminating one free annual, those are relatively easy changes that could be made. I don't have significant concerns about those. The user pay, as Commissioner Cruz pointed out, that is a bigger programmatic change that would have to be communicated. So it would be more challenging. I'm not saying it's impossible, but it would be more challenging, and it would require quite a bit of planning between now and October 1st to pull it off successfully. All right. So as a reminder, the figures that are up here, this is what was in the long-term contract without the deduct alternatives. So with the deduct alternatives, the number that we presented was $14.22 per month for a residential customer. With the deduct alternatives added back in, for the 111 bottom option, we were at $15.74. So I'm adding this just as a reminder to give you a point of comparison, but it's also important to note that it's not a true simple comparison with the extension rates here. And what I mean by that is the long-term contract, the 10-year contract that had been before the board and has been tabled already, is a different scope of services than the extension contract. So the most important difference is the processing of recyclables. That is included in the extension, the 1 to 2 year extension. That was not included in the long-term contract. So that would be an additional expense. So we can't just say $14.22 per month now becomes potentially $16.64 per month. It's two different scopes of work. In addition to that, it's manual versus an automated service. It's a 1 to 2 year extension with less market fluctuation versus a 10-year contract. And then it's different service areas. We had been looking at a a split of 3 different service areas in the long-term contract versus the existing contract is 2 service areas. So it's tempting to just say, you know, there's a price we had 2 months ago versus a price we have today, but it's not a clear-cut apples-to-apples comparison. So building on that a little bit, when you look at our existing rate structure, what do we pay for our household rate versus what does the customer get billed? There's a number of things that are added to that bill. There's stormwater, there's some of the operation of the landfill, there's tipping fees that we take into consideration. So we add about, it's approximate, but about $5 per month on top of what the bill is from the waste hauler in the existing contract. If we make the assumption that that's going to carry forward because it's the same contract, there have to be a rate study that'll have to actually narrow in on that figure a little bit more. But if we just make the assumption that it's $5 more, we're looking at somewhere in the $21 to $22 per month if it's a 2-year extension. So for the first year, it's about $21. Second year, it'd be about $22. In the existing long-term contract, it's somewhere in that same ballpark because it's the price of that $5 plus it's the price to process recyclables. It's the cost of the carts that was going to have to be added to the bill because, you know, we say we were going to provide the carts to residents. Those aren't free. You know, we have to recoup those costs as part of our monthly bill. So when you look at the comparison between the long-term contract and this extension, we're in the same ballpark for these 1 to 2 years, actually. And by doing that, we also get to extend the existing scope of work that the haulers are providing today. So next steps, we are planning to come back to the board on May 9th, pending the direction from the board today, just to get a vote to say, how do you want us to develop extension contracts? And then we would develop those documents with procurement and county attorney's office, have the vendors sign off on them, and bring it back to the board for execution. At a future meeting, we will have to have a conversation about a rate adjustment. Unfortunately, we're still talking about moving from about $14 and change per month for these bills to the need for closer to $21 to $22 per month. We're simply not going to be able to absorb those costs without a rate adjustment for this extension period. And then last, if the 2-year option is selected by the board, we want to initiate an additional work session to make sure that we have a full understanding of what you want in that new contract and new solicitation. So things like, do you want a 111 or a 211? Do you want manual versus automated? You know, it's basically the same conversations we've been having on the long-term extension. We want to make sure that we know what the board would like to see in that final contract. And with that, happy to answer any questions that you have.
Commissioner Thatcher.
Boy, my voice is something today. Thank you, Mr. Chair. So part of what I try to do, I want to be able to look people in the eye later and say, you know, if a situation is not what anyone wants, I want to be able to say, you know, this stinks, but we did everything we could. And so one of the things that I just want to have, I think I'm really just asking this to be on the record because I believe I know the answer. But when I first saw this issue brought forward, my proposal was if we love the level of service that we're getting, we like what we're paying for it, but we understand that the economy has moved on in the last, 15 years, so that's not sustainable financially. My idea was let's stick with what we got and let's start replacing their trucks, say a quarter of their trucks, at a time, a fifth of their trucks at a time. So we started financing that and then do a smaller incremental, price adjustment to where it makes sense for them. But I believe that between the attorney and our procurement, that is not an option. I just want that on the record for people at home to know that because of government and the way the rules are, something that might, as a small business, you have much more, leeway, or a large business, you have more leeway to just sit down and say, this is what I want, let's make it happen. But we don't have that in this particular case. Is that correct? I think so, sure.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Satcher, that is correct. We have both bond covenants and statutory requirements that we simply ran out of extensions on these contracts. They're old contracts by utility standards. But I will say that when you go through the RFP process, you do have the ability to negotiate those issues with anyone who responds. So it's not as though we're helpless to have those negotiations. Personally, I think it's a very good presentation because the board basically said, look, we should have had more input on this over the last couple of years. And so what they're doing is bringing you a way to extend the current contracts and then go back to square one and go through the process again and give the board that opportunity to have input on it before it's sort of set in stone, so that when it comes back in line with the board's expectations. That's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Bill. I appreciate it. And I just want to put that out there. There's coming a time, even though we do our best to communicate, especially bad news, we try to communicate it ahead of time. But it seems like at some point we're going to have to, there's still going to be people, what? My rate changed how much? Why? When we go through the full, a 10-year contract. So, when that time comes, I want it to be known that, we looked at our options and we are negotiating. In fact, we're not leaving anything out or any stone unturned. And obviously, y'all are working very hard. And so I appreciate that. And I just wanted that on the record officially. So thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Evan.
Thank you, sir. Is there anyone else who would like to comment at this time? Okay. So you have questions and comments up there, but I think you more or less need comments then at this point. You're looking for some sort of direction here, right? I think you got some direction from Commissioner Baugh and myself. We liked your simplistic changes, but the 211 we feel has to stay. Commissioner Cruz had his comments. Ballard, Commissioner Satcher on the extension. Do you have any direction for Mr. Pilichowski?
On the 1 versus 2 years, I would say that the small deducts just seem to not be worth it. I mean, 20 cents between two of the three, or even the largest two, it's just not worth it. Because you're going to end up with people that are putting out, things and have no idea, and then amount of just the communication cost to tell them that the deal has changed is going to end up eating that up. So I'm not interested in the small deduct alternatives. I agree with the board on the easiest and the best thing's going to be to keep the 211 at this point, seems like. And then the other thing is 1 versus 2 years? Is that the other question that we're...
Correct.
Can I see the numbers on that? Before I weigh in.
Let me ask you, as you're looking this up, Mr. Pilichowski, if we do 2 years, but you can get the deal worked out sooner, I mean, you know what I'm saying? Like, if we give you the 2 years, but you can get it done sooner, is that something that can be executed?
I'm going to actually direct that to the purchasing official here.
And perhaps the new deal wouldn't take effect until, but I would like for us to get this resolved sooner than 2 years, if that makes sense.
Good morning, Commissioners. Regarding the RFP process, our identified cycle time is approximately 180 days from the time that we receive the requisition to when we have contract execution. That being said, that is for a normal run-of-the-mill RFP. It would really depend on how long we advertise, the negotiation time, This is a very large, the biggest contract in Manatee County history. So there's going to be a lot of due diligence that's going to be built into that. Could it be done? Potentially. I think it would just depend on how long that solicitation/negotiation process takes. And then obviously referring to utilities regarding a transition plan to get everything in place by the time the new extensions are over.
That wasn't an answer, but okay. I didn't get an answer out of that. I got information out of it, which I appreciate, Jake. You should be sitting over here in these chairs.
And I'll let Jake correct me here, but I believe we would be contractually bound in an extension period that we wouldn't want to cancel that.
Well, I know a good lawyer, though. Mr. Clegg?
I think that's probably going to be right, because you're seeing a differential between the fees, and so the expectation of the parties on the other side is that they're going to get the 2 years in order to recoup their expenses amortized over a longer period of time. So I'm guessing they're going to negotiate some sort of, if we do, want an out, that there's going to be at cost. So I doubt there's going to be any savings. That's typically how it's done, but we're speculating at this point.
Thank you. Commissioner Baugh.
That's what I expected the county attorney to say. That's what I thought. It seems to me that it would be great if we could say 180 days, but let's face it, that's not going to happen. Not on this, because it is the largest contract that the county has. So basically, it seems like to me that I think this board wants to be very involved in this situation moving forward. I think that we expect and we'll try our best to get an out of the ordinary contract together. We're going to think out of the box somewhat. At least some of us will. So I'm not, for me, I think 2 years is probably, as much as I hate to say it, I think it's probably more in line with what it's going to take for us to be able to look at all alternatives. Because I mean, we're sitting back and we know that we've got two vendors here, but, we've got to come up with the best we can for the citizens of Manatee. I mean, that's what it's all about. So as much as I hate it, I think it's going to take the 2 years for us to really be thorough and to have the time that it's going to take. And Jake is shaking his head yes. So, I mean, there'd be no reason to sit back and say, well, we're only going to take the 1 year. And then all of a sudden we go, okay, well, we ended up with what we had in the first place. That's not an option, at least not for this commissioner. So, I think it's probably going to take the 2 years. And Evan, I want to commend you on a job well done so far. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Bearden.
I'm just going to echo Commissioner Ball's comments. I'm with you in regards to the 2-year extension. I think it's necessary, especially with a contract as big as this. I appreciate everything and all the hard work that you've done, Evan, and putting everything out on the table and just bringing this to us. So I appreciate that.
All right. You feel good about that? Okay. Thank you, Evan. Appreciate it. Good. Well done.
Thank you.
That is our last agenda item. Before we go to public comment, do commissioners have anything to add? Commissioner Satcher.
I was just trying to think of something of Mike's that we could all decide to take off of his CIP. Just a joke, bad joke, nothing. Sir.
Commissioner Baugh.
Yeah, just a comment, just to set the record straight on some things. I wasn't at the land use meeting last Thursday because I was actually in Orlando at the MPOAC meeting that had been on my calendar since January, I know. So, just to set the record straight, I was doing county business. The meeting before that I missed, I was doing county business. I am leaving tomorrow, just so everybody knows, I am leaving tomorrow going to St. Pete for the Resiliency Summit with the Tampa Bay Regional Planning Council. I'm also chair of that organization, and I will be there until Friday. So make no mistake, if anybody's wondering if Vanessa Baugh is here, yes, I am here, and working diligently for the citizens of Manatee County. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. I'll see you Thursday at the Resiliency Summit. Yes. Okay, any other comments? Okay, then we're going to open this up to public comment. Is there anyone from the public who would like to come forward at this time to address any of the agenda items discussed during today's meeting? Please state your first and last name, your county of residence, and Mr. Gibolino, you'll have 3 minutes.
Thank you. For the record, Glenn Gibolina. I want to reclaim my time. So, anyways, I had sent you all of this about the funds. I want to do a little housekeeping. Public comment. That's what we're here for. We had three items on the agenda. We had a 28-minute presentation that several people wanted to speak, and you didn't give an opportunity for public comment. The second agenda rolled over. You had about an hour presentation. You had several people that wanted to talk about RPA funds. They all left. How many people you think left for public comment? Last man standing. It's a disservice when you don't want to hear from the people that have something to say on each agenda item. We deserve our 3 minutes. If we're going to take effort to come down here and park our cars and listen to a 28-minute service on veterans services and people want to weigh in on it, you should want to hear them. It's bad enough you don't take phone calls anymore. It's unbelievable the disrespect you give the public when they go out of their way to get here. I sent you this from Alice. 4 out of 10. 4 out of 10 people live below the average means here in the county. 10% are poverty stricken. I don't see anything on workforce housing in this budget. I don't see anything. We have a golden opportunity here to spend millions on workforce housing, and it's not even being addressed. There's a lot of information that's missed here. George, I'm with you. Put it in a slush fund? No way. No way, because then all that money will go into abyss. Here's what I would like to proffer. You don't have to go back to December 2024. I would say let the projects move forward. Come back in 1 year. You can always dump the money in the slush fund a year from now. But that would give the public a gauge and say, well, out of all these projects, how long did we move the needle? How many did we complete? When it goes into abyss, you keep us out of the loop. Definitely against that. I think you need to do that for at least a year. Go with the projects you have. And you know what? The affordable housing loans, those are Laura's. That's not affordable housing. Transitional housing development, what does that mean? I had people coming in, what does that mean? Is it brick and mortar or is it just services? When you provide services without rooftops, you're just in a hamster wheel. You're not doing anybody any good. You want to do new fire stations? Well, guess what? That's socialized workforce. We should think about doing workforce housing for the people that need it. It's unbelievable that we don't have nothing for workforce housing. And my 3 minutes are up. Thank you very much.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to come forward at this time to address the board on any of the items that were presented in today's workshop? Any additional public comment? Yes, please state your first and last name, your county of residence, and you have 3 minutes to address the board on today's items.
Tina Gilleret, Manatee County. I'm here to speak about the ARP funds from my perspective as the Manatee County coordinator of this year's point-in-time homeless census. So I noticed on the sheet that there were items for the veteran homeless project that we talked about a few sessions ago, and also a number 19 assistance for the homeless. It appears that the number 19 did not continue in the proposed funding. I would suggest that that may be a concern if that was by design and not just an omission in the presentation. Suncoast hasn't released the results of this year's count yet, as I think you know, but I would be pretty confident to expect that Manatee County will see an increase relative to last year, and also, from a relative perspective to adjacent counties. So I just want to point that out. And I see the transitional housing, which perhaps that's what the 4 million represents. But again, it's unclear from the presentation. And I think it would be helpful to be able to see the original projects, new proposed ones, kind of crosswalk them from original state to what's being proposed in the future. And then citizens will be much more clear on what's actually being done with the funds. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to come forward to address the board on any of the items discussed in today's workshop? Okay, seeing no one, we're going to close public comment at this time. And Commissioner Baugh is on the board to speak, ma'am.
Yes, sir. I just wanted to respond to some of the comments that I heard. If we just have a morning session in our workshop, we've always done it the same way, with agenda items, and then commissioner comments and public comment. We always do it, and it's on there. It's on the agenda. We followed the agenda. So we have to follow the agenda. The only time we do it differently is if we're having a different session in the afternoon. Then we allow public comment in the morning and in the afternoon. So, I'm not sure what some of the comments were, why they were made, because I don't think they were accurate. Today is just a workshop. There's no vote today. And if you were listening in the workshop, you would have heard it's coming back before us in one of our meetings here soon, in this month, for vote. So that's when we'll be moving. The other thing, as far as the homeless and the comment, actually, it's increased. If you look at the generational impact project list, numbers 5 and 6, transitional housing development, and another one for operations. And it's to help reduce the homeless crisis facing Manatee County. So, we have included that. We are looking at that. The veterans housing, we're moving forward with that. So to chastise this board, as I just heard, I'm a little surprised because we did cover it. So I just wanted to mention that and say thank you for being here. We would never have a workshop and not let the public speak. We always do. So that's my comments. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Mr. Washington.
Mr. Chair, I'm sorry to interrupt, but we have a possible active shooter at USF in the gymnasium. Possibly 15 individuals may have been shot. So public safety and other staff are en route now to find out more about it. I just got off the phone with the acting director of public safety trying to get more information, but I want to make the board aware it did get pushed out through notifications. So I'll keep you folks informed as we get more information.
Yeah.
And it's the one in Sarasota, not Tampa.
It's Sarasota. No, I pulled up the 911 dashboard. It's Sarasota. We have 15 units on scene.
Yeah.
Commissioner Satcher, would you lead us in prayer to close this meeting, please? If you're able to stand at this time, please do.
Lord, we come before you. We ask you to stop that shooter in Jesus' name, whatever it takes, Lord, that the right person, the right thing would happen, that would be stopped. Lord, for every person that might have already been injured or worse, Lord, we pray that you would come alongside them, Lord, that you would save lives. Lord, we thank you that is always your intention, that you're always looking for our good, even though there may be evil people and even though there is a devil. We thank you that you are good and you are working on our behalf. Lead and guide our safety officers and anyone nearby that can help. Show them exactly where to go, how to get there quickly, easily, to stop this threat in its tracks. In Jesus' name, amen.
Thank you, sir. So on that somber note, we will close this meeting. We're adjourned.